What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Frankie Distoli Show. I am your host, Frankie Distoli. We are here with episode 2. I am super excited to be back with you guys. And I just want to take a moment to just say thank you so much to everybody that listened to episode 1 that had reached out to me to show their support and love for it and give me some feedback also. I'm very, very appreciative of all of it. I really enjoyed making that episode, and I'm looking forward to continuing to put out some content for you guys. And I hope that you continue to listen in and you continue to like the show and continue to give me some feedback and show support. It really means a lot. But yesterday, I out of everybody that has reached out to me, super appreciative of everybody. But I received one text last night that really made me go to bed last night and pretty much say, if that was the only podcast I ever recorded, I would be happy stopping there. And the text came from a buddy of mine. His name's Ryan. And I met Ryan about 5 months ago-ish, maybe 6 months ago. And Ryan's in real estate. He's actually a student at Distoli's Dojo. He's also a husband. He's also a father. And he's an entrepreneur. And he texted me last night. I'm just going to read the text. He said, "Your pod inspired me to learn how to pray the Rosary. Was feeling super overwhelmed yesterday, then did that before going to bed and woke up and felt like a new man." And that right there just meant so much to me because, we're going to talk about a lot on the show. We're going to talk about entrepreneurship. We're going to talk about real estate. We're going to talk about achieving financial freedom. But if there's one thing that I really hold closely is I want to do my absolute best to carry out God's will and to help people not just achieve financial freedom, but spiritual freedom, to achieve eternity with God. And the fact that Ryan had reached out to me and mentioned that to me, it really meant the world to me. And this is a little off topic. I wasn't planning on making an episode necessarily around the Rosary today, but just being on that point, I just wanted to talk briefly about it and the importance of it. And then we'll kind of go from there. And I have a great episode today where we're going to talk about how to leave your W-2 job successfully. And I'm going to break it down into a 4-point plan, the plan that I followed myself that got me out of my W-2 job, out of my corporate job, into the real estate world, into entrepreneurship, into business ownership. And I'm very excited to go through that. But before that, we're just going to take a couple minutes to talk a little bit about the Rosary. So for everybody that's listening, you might be, Christian, you might be Catholic, you might not necessarily, be that religion at all. You might be another religion. But I just want to talk a little bit about Catholicism and really why I love it. There's a bunch of reasons why I'm Catholic. There's a bunch of reasons why I choose this faith. But one of them is the saints. And I think a lot of people that aren't Catholic, they think so much on, Catholics, they worship Mary. And that's not the case. We don't worship Mary. We don't worship any saints. But what we do is we honor the saints. And why I love honoring the saints is because the saints are people just like you and I. That's really it. They were regular people that had regular lives and followed this path to be like Jesus and to be someone that does above and beyond what the normal person, goes about their life to do. And when we look at Mary, her role in God's plan was, second to none. I mean, being the mother of Christ, obviously. But we look at other saints too, such as Saint Joseph, who was a carpenter, a regular man who, had the ability to be the spouse of Mary, to be the father of Jesus Christ on earth. We look at other saints such as, Saint Bernadette, which I named my daughter after. This young girl who was visited by Mary, who ends up changing so much in France in Lourdes. All these saints that have done so much. Saint Maximilian Kolbe, who sacrificed his life in World War II in a Nazi camp. All these saints that were regular people that did extraordinary things and brought Christ into people's lives. And that's why us Catholics, we honor them, because we see that we are same as them. We're just regular people that have the ability to do such things that glorify Christ. So that's, as a Catholic, that's one thing that I love about my faith is I get the opportunity to honor these saints. I get to look at them as in some cases like a role model, and I get to really try to model my life after a lot of these saints. And ultimately, of course, the greatest, prototype for us is Jesus Christ, and we do everything we can to model him, and we worship him in all of the ways that we do. But we look at these saints and we realize the impact that they had in this world. And we realize that we can be as impactful as well if we follow in their footsteps. And that's one thing that, for my kids and in my household, is, there's a lot of, things about saints around the house, because I pray that my daughter and my son, God willing, in the future, that they look to them as role models. And that's not to say that they can't, be, into, Powerpuff Girls or Batman or whatever the case is, but that they look to these saints and say, hey, these were regular people just like I am, and I could do what they have done. So as a Catholic, that's a really big thing for us. And that's why one of the reasons why I love being Catholic. So a little talk on the Rosary, how it kind of came about, and we'll talk about what it is. But the Catholic tradition is that the Blessed Mother Mary gave the Rosary to Saint Dominic around the year 1208, and pretty much came to him and said, I want you to teach everyone how to pray the Rosary, and I am going to ensure your success in doing so. And that's kind of how it all originated. And the Rosary is really a meditation, a prayer, combining of a bunch of different prayers within it, that really help focus on the pivotal moments in Jesus's life here on earth, and Mary's intercession in those moments as well. And it allows us, as we're praying the Rosary, to really put ourselves in the position of what Mary experienced, what Jesus experienced, what was going on there, and how we can really reflect on those times. And it is a phenomenal tool. It is also a spiritual weapon to really keep you, in your best spiritual state as well. And I really cannot speak highly enough on praying it. When you do pray it, it usually takes anywhere between 15 to 20 minutes. You can do it sooner. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I get my Rosary through in like 9 minutes. I'm not saying that's the best thing to do, but really it helps ground you and helps you stay focused and in communion with God as you are praying it. So I really suggest to everybody, go out and pray the Rosary, pray it daily. As you can see, if you're watching on the video, I have my company, my poster behind me, Rosary and Real Estate. Pray the Rosary, buy real estate. It's something that I do daily. It keeps me in communion with God, as I mentioned, and it really will help bring you closer to Christ and really understand everything that he has gone through for us and Mary's intercession as well. So I am going to include in the show notes a little pamphlet on how to pray the Rosary. You could buy this from the St. Jude store for 45 cents. 45 cents. You could buy this beautiful pamphlet. It's got some beautiful Catholic art in there that shows each mystery with a little bit of a reflection and a little bit of a summary of each mystery, so you could pray on it. And I'm also going to be adding a video in the show notes as well, where I will be explaining how to pray the Rosary. And then I will also be praying the Rosary with you guys. So if you want to pray the Rosary, if you want to listen to how I pray the Rosary, I am going to include a little video in the show notes to help you guys really understand how I pray it. And I want to really start this movement with all of you guys. We need to be praying the Rosary daily, as we need to be buying real estate to achieve that financial freedom. That's the whole point of Rosary and real estate. But if you guys have any questions on that, of course, feel free to hit me up. But please visit that link in the show notes. I hope that you pray the Rosary with me, and I hope that we get on that on the daily. So without further ado, we are going to get into episode 2, which the focus is leaving your W-2 job. And I'm going to break it down in a 4-point segment. I'll give you the quick breakdown of the 4 points. The first one is vision. The second one is transition. The third point is action. And the fourth point is faith. And I'm going to be breaking down all 4 of those points, talking about what you need to be doing in those sections and how to execute on that successfully. But before we get into that, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about what has really led to me leaving my W-2 job, right? So initially, and I know if you listen to episode 1, Frat Star to Father, if you haven't, I definitely please recommend going back and listening to that episode. I do talk a little bit about my transition. I'm going to break it down a little bit further now. But really, to give you guys some backstory, I left medical device sales. I went into working for a real estate investment company where I came in as an acquisitions manager. I went into these, disgusting houses, flea-infested houses, houses that were falling apart, roofs are coming down, water's breaking in, all of the fun stuff. And you might be saying, hey, isn't that enough to make you want to leave that job? I actually really loved it. I really, really enjoyed meeting with a lot of these sellers, understanding their situation, seeing how I could be a solution for their problem. And at the same time, I was getting paid to learn what I wanted to learn, which was how to become a real estate investor. That's why I jumped into that role initially. And when I did take that role, as I mentioned, when I left medical device sales, I was making really good money. I was making well over 6 figures. I took about a 60% pay cut to go into this job, but I knew that I was sacrificing that money, and in return, I would get education, which would lead me to becoming the man that eventually I wanted to be. And I got that straight from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That book is super, super critical for any future entrepreneurs out there or entrepreneurs currently that want to get a little more involved. So I would definitely highly recommend reading that. But when I got into the real estate investment company, I was an acquisitions manager. I did that for about 6 months. I did, very well in the role that I was in, that I got promoted to be the office director, which meant I led the office. At this point, now I have people working under me, and I was putting them in the right position so that we could execute and become a successful office. After about 6 months of doing that, we successfully grew to being one of the top 5 offices in the nation. and I was promoted to be a regional sales leader, which meant now I ran multiple offices. So I ran the PA office, I ran the New Jersey office, I ran the Alabama office, and I ran the Texas office. And I did have my hand a little bit in Memphis and Cincinnati, Ohio. So I was kind of all over the place. And I was doing some really great things. And I was getting flown out to, the headquarters. I was meeting with the CEO. We were talking about a lot of big picture things. I was flying all over the place. I was in, Alabama, Tennessee, Ohio, Texas. I was flying about 3 to 4, I would say 3 weeks out of every 4 weeks a month, I was away. And although this was great, there were also some negative, repercussions from this. I had a pregnant wife at home, so I was away a lot of the time. And then even when I came home from being all over the place, it just didn't feel the same. Like I just felt like I was on at all times. And when I was home for that 1 week a month that I was home, it was just hard to get into more of like a family, lifestyle again. Like I just felt constantly on at all times. I was on my phone 24/7. I was talking with all of these reps. And having said that, I loved my relationships with my field reps. One thing that I'm really, really, proud of is I've helped all these field reps do over $1.2 million in assignment fees when it comes to wholesaling real estate. And I'm very proud of that. But I realized that I'm coming home and I'm just not totally present. And it started to take a little bit of a toll on me. And as time went on, as my wife got a little bit closer to having our daughter, I had to pump the brakes and let the, sales leadership know, hey guys, I can't travel as much for these next couple months just because my wife is getting closer to delivering. And that was totally respected. It was totally fine. But what ended up happening was some new sales leadership came in, and we just didn't mesh and jive as well. And I think they kind of came in and didn't really see all of the work that was put in prior to them getting there. And long story short, when after my daughter was born, my role just changed. I felt very much like I was in the big leagues. I was traveling all over the place. And now I kind of had to step back and I was like in more so of like the minor leagues. And it just didn't feel as fruitful and as rewarding. And one thing about me that you guys are going to learn is like, I hate being stagnant. Like that is the one thing that drives me crazy. I need to constantly be developing and working and growing. And when I feel stagnant that's when I feel like I'm hitting a ceiling and I need to bounce. I need to get out. I need to move on and do something else. So as this is all going on, my daughter's born in November. We're in January now. And I'm doing a program called Exodus 90. And Exodus 90 is a spiritual retreat. And I'm going to tell you how kind of like it's over the course of 90 days. It leads you up into Easter. And how this kind of came to me is I rolled jujitsu and I was with a buddy of mine, Orlando. And we were rolling jujitsu. It was my first time that I met Orlando, and he happened to be in real estate also. And I was still with my old company at this time. And I pretty much was just like, hey, like, let's grab, lunch. Let's talk. Let's see if we could work together in any way, blah, blah, blah. So we end up getting lunch. And what I do before any time that I eat is I pray. And I pretty much said to Orlando, hey, I don't know if you're like a religious guy, but, I pray before I eat every time. So if you want to join me, by all means. But if not, like, that's totally okay. And I said a little prayer before we ate. And it turns out that he also is a religious guy. He's also Catholic. And for an hour and a half, we didn't even say one word about real estate. We just was talking about religion, was talking about faith, was talking about family, all this other stuff. And he had introduced me to this program called Exodus 90, which is a 90-day spiritual retreat. And the purpose of it is to find freedom in uncommon ways. And really, the whole Exodus journey is it brings you through the book of Exodus and also kind of brings you into Joshua's story and coming out of Egypt and going into the desert and all of that stuff from the Old Testament. And it really helps unite you to in a sense, the pharaohs that kind of control your life and how to let go of those things and find freedom in God. And this came at a really, special time for me. And I decided to do this journey. And it is broken up every day. It's every day for 90 days. It's broken up into disciplines. So some of these disciplines you guys are probably going to hear, you're going to be like, that's out of control. But like the purpose is to help you detach from just all these common things that we have in life. So some of the disciplines were every single day you need to take cold showers. And some of you guys are probably already tuning out of this. But let me tell you something. I started doing this in January of 2024, and we're here in December of 2024, and I still take cold showers. They're one of the best things for you. They wake you up. They're good for your immune system. But long story short, it's, again, one of those things that we just take for granted, these warm showers. And taking cold showers helps get you out of those, commonalities of what life brings. no sweeteners, which means I've been drinking black iced coffee now ever since then. But again, it's just one of those things where we take for granted. Oh, we'll go to Starbucks, we get a chestnut praline latte or whatever it is, and it's like, listen, we're going to take those out of the equation now, right? Those things are out. No TV, which was a godsend for me because I did watch a lot of TV. It was one of those things where I'd come home from work and I would just get on the couch and throw the TV on. So this led to more prayer. It led to more reading books. It led to just a lot more growth, getting rid of some of those things that just, again, have a hold on your life. An hour of prayer a day. Some of you guys are probably like, I'm struggling to just pray for 5 minutes a day. But an hour of prayer a day is on the disciplines for Exodus 90. And this was by all the most pivotal thing for me, to spend an hour a day in prayer and meditation and being focused on your relationship with God it takes you to new levels. And along with a bunch of other stuff as well, there were a handful of other disciplines. There is also a fraternity aspect to it. So you do have other people that are doing Exodus that you're in a group with, and you're able to really help each other. You're anchoring for each other. And it was an unbelievable thing. But to make a long story short with Exodus 90, this came at the most perfect time for me. It really was right as I was kind of entering into this new year and I was feeling stagnant. And I had just realized that once again, I was in a position that I just wasn't meant to be in. I was meant to do more. And I felt that God's purpose for me was more than just being in this role. So as I'm praying and going through this whole journey of Exodus 90 is when I decided that I was going to leave my W-2 job. And there were a few things that came to me, right? When I was thinking about it, so I was like, was this even possible? Like, was it even possible for me to leave my W-2? What would I go and do? Like, I'm going to go start my own business, but like, is it even going to bear any fruit? Am I going to be able to be successful when I go start this business? Another question that I was having in my head was, is this irresponsible? And by irresponsible, I mean, I have a 2-month-old daughter at home at this time. I have, a wife who's a stay-at-home mom, which is my ultimate goal is to keep her that way, because I really feel that her role as a mother, being at home, being the nurturer, is so important. It's so important. I never want to lose that. I want her to be a stay-at-home mom. I reject sending her back to work. It's important for me to keep her there. So I'm saying to myself, is this irresponsible? I'm making good money here. I'm going to leave this and I'm going to go jump into the unknown. And what happens if I fail? Right, I have a daughter who I'm providing for. I have a wife who I'm providing for. I need to make sure that I succeed. Is it irresponsible for me to leave? At this time, also, we really didn't have much in the savings. Like, we probably had like $8,000 in the savings. So even if I left, I don't have a lot of money to really allow us to survive on a long at a time. $8,000 will get us pretty much like a month and a half. So there was so much going through my head. And thankfully, as this is all progressing, I have prayer that I'm falling back on. I have my faith. I have God continuing to put things in front of me that are showing me that this is the path that I'm supposed to go. I also have an extremely supportive wife who, even though all of those things were true, she was telling me, you need to go. You need to leave. You need to go do your own thing. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of a good support system when you are making a transition like this, or when you're starting a new business or whatever it might be. I cannot emphasize enough the benefit that it was to me to have a wife at home who was encouraging me to go out and achieve my dreams and goals. And I really owe so much of it to Christina and to her support. But all of this was kind of coming into a boiling point. And I really, at this point, it was January, February. One thing that I was doing was that first step, and that first step of transitioning, or I should say leaving your W-2 to go into, whether it's real estate or business ownership or entrepreneurship, is the vision. And at this point, I was reading a good amount of books. I reread Rich Dad Poor Dad. I read Robert Kiyosaki's Cash Flow Quadrant, which is the second book in that trilogy. And then I also read another book called Think and Grow Rich, which was handed to me a couple of years ago, and I actually just never opened. And I came around to opening it. And that book was actually really pivotal, because Think and Grow Rich, probably the biggest concept in that book, is that your subconscious mind is what really dictates who you are. And whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. There's that saying, right? And Think and Grow Rich is really a basis of that book. So what I gained from reading these books is that vision is super, super critical. And if you do not know where you're going, you're going to end up in no man's land, right? You need to know where you're going. So at this point, when I've made this determination that I was going to leave my job, the first thing that I did was I put together my vision. What does my life look like in 5 years? what does my life look like in 1 year? And what does my life look like in 6 months? And what I did is I wrote that down. I didn't just think it in my head. I wrote it down on paper, and then I also wrote it in my phone. So I knew I'd have it in front of me, whether I'm at home or I'm out of the house and I have it on my phone. And I would read those statements every single morning and every single night, and I would read it out loud. And I know that sounds like kind of like, not necessarily important, but when you read it out loud and you say it out loud, it gives you conviction. And that is so important, something you need. You need to be convicted. You need to be convicted that this vision is a reality for my life. I can make this happen. And the more that you say it, the more that you continue to repeat it, the more it's going to be programmed into your subconscious mind. And all of a sudden, when you start programming that into your mind and your body start putting you in positions to take action. And that is like what the most low-key thing about doing this is it's not so much of just repeating it and saying it. It's programming it into your head to believe that you can do it and that you will do it. And then all of a sudden pieces start falling into place. It's like magic how it happens. So step one is really understanding that vision, knowing who you are, where you want to be in 5 years, where you want to be in 1 year, where you want to be in 6 months, writing it down and repeating it over and over in your head. And once you have that vision in place, then you can start moving into step two, which is the transition. The transition is most likely going to be the longest step of the process, and it's going to be very important. And this could go one of two ways. The transition can go one of two ways. The first way is that you might stay at your W-2 job while working on getting out and going on to the next paths, right? So something that I'll, kind of just pull an example out of thin air here. Maybe you're, an engineer and you want to get into real estate investing, right? So you say over the next 6 months to a year, maybe I'm going to save some money. I'm going to buy a property. I'm going to do the BRRRR strategy on that property where I buy it, I rehab it, I rent it out, I refinance on it, and then I pull that equity out of it and I go buy another property. And over the next year, I'm going to get to 3 properties where I know I can make, $1,600 in net cash flow a month. And that'll give me enough little wiggle room to go out and start doing this full time or whatever the case might be, right? That is an example of how you could transition while still being at your W-2, but you're remembering the vision of this is what I'm going to go achieve. So I'm going to continue to work on that as that goes until I'm ready to pivot out of my W-2 and I'm ready to go into, whatever I'm doing full time. That's one way of doing it. That's a very valid transition. You can do that. The second is how to figure out how to leave your W-2 job and pretty much stay afloat while working on your new path, whether that's to real estate, business ownership, entrepreneurship, whatever it might be. That is the path that I personally chose. There's a reason why I did that. I'm out here like saying to everybody I suggest doing this. By all means, everybody has things that work differently for them. But the reason I did that is a few reasons. Number one is I was already in the real estate space, right? So I was developing my course for real estate investing. And I knew that right there was already a conflict of interest, right? If I go out and I start buying a bunch of properties, I know that that's also a conflict of interest. So just by default, I had a few conflict of interests that I probably still could have kind of did, but I just didn't want to get into murky water. That was one. Number two is I know that personally, I am just somebody who I respond a lot better when my back's against the wall. And I know that I don't have that certainty. So I knew that if I left my W-2 and I didn't have that certainty, that I would be able to work even harder. I would be 100% focused. I'd be super dedicated. I would be totally locked in on achieving the vision that I had set out for myself. So for me, leaving the W-2, figuring out how to stay afloat while I develop my business was the better path for me. And again, you might be saying, wow, you had a wife and a kid at home and not much in the savings and you were going to leave all that's pretty irresponsible. There is definitely that level of that. That could be the case, but I was so convicted with faith, which is what we're going to talk about in the fourth step. So, but those are the two ways that you could probably make that transition, or at least, understand how you're going to transition. So what I did, and this is all things that everybody's story is going to be different on how you transition, but here's a few things that I was doing in my transition plan. The first thing I did was I started to meet with local investors, right? So I thought of my vision. I thought about who I wanted to become, right? So at this point, I was doing real estate wholesaling. I'd wholesaled over $1 million in assignment fees. I helped other people wholesale over $1.2 million in assignment fees. I was very, very good at wholesaling. I was very good at acquisitions, finding deals off market, direct to seller, acquiring those deals under contract. Where I needed more assistance was what happens after the fact. After those properties close, renovating those properties, getting tenants in there, being, in the project management field, refinancing on them, doing all those different exit strategies. That's where I needed more help. So what I did was similar to when I left medical device to go into real estate investing with this company, is I met up with some local investors who I looked up to. And I pretty much said, what can I do for you? How can I help your business? How can I help your business thrive? And in the meantime, I will get education out of it. And of course, there will be some compensation for me if I help them succeed. And by meeting with a few people, a few local investors, a few of my mentors, I developed some really good relationships and started laying some groundwork of people that if I left my W-2 could use my skill set, could use my services to help make them more money, to leverage my skills to make them more money, and at the same time put money in my pocket so I could stay afloat, and I'll get the education to become the investor that I want to be. So that was one thing. I started meeting with investors, started meeting with, potential mentors, all of that stuff, that seek to serve mentality. The second thing I did, at this point, I was living in a house hack, right? Which I will make separate videos on investing in real estate for people that are looking to break in. But one strategy, the first strategy that I did aside from wholesaling was called house hacking, which is where I bought a duplex. My wife and I lived in one unit. We rented out the other unit. When I bought this house, I used what's called an FHA 203K loan. A little bit in the weeds, don't get too caught up on this stuff. But pretty much what it was a low down payment loan that allowed me to wrap my renovation cost into the loan. Why this is really awesome is because by doing that, I bought this house, I renovated it without putting any extra money out of pocket, and I built equity into the house. That equity was something that I was able to tap into. So after I did this and I had the property rented out and my wife and I were living in the bottom unit, I pulled what was called a HELOC on the house, which is a home equity line of credit. Now I'll give you guys some quick numbers. I bought the duplex for $235,000. I put $30,000 in renovation into it. Again, that's wrapped into the loan. The house appraised afterwards for, I believe, $304,000. Now, when I pulled the home equity line of credit, the bank allowed me to get, equity up to 90% of the value. So I was able to pull a line out of $30,000. Now, of course, I pay interest on that line. It's basically like a line of credit. It doesn't show up on my credit report or anything along those lines. It's leveraged against the house. The house is the asset that backs it. But long story short is now I had $30,000 extra thanks to this investment that I made a year and a half prior that I had to my advantage. And I could use if I, end up jumping out into the unknown and things start going, south and I all of a sudden need money. I have that money available to me now. Or I could use it to go buy other assets, to go buy more properties, which is what I did, which I'll get into. But I pulled that HELOC. That was a big step. The third thing that I did was I formed a partnership. So my partner, Steve, and I, we joined together and we figured out what we wanted to do. We wanted to get into the BRRRR strategy, which is what I mentioned before. We wanted to buy houses, renovate them, rent them out, refinance, and repeat. There's a reason that we did this. One, we knew that we could make money by doing this, which was big for us, obviously helping us stay afloat. He was also transitioning to leave his job as well and jump into real estate. And then another thing was also we wanted to build wealth as we were doing that. And in my opinion, holding properties, buy and hold properties that are going to continue to pay you while you have tenants in there that are paying down the debt is the definition of generating, generational wealth in a sense. So that was our kind of strategy. And we formed our partnership, which we called D&D Equities. The next thing I did is I met with non-compete attorneys. So as this is all going on, I have a non-compete. I can't wholesale for 2 years. That's my non-compete. I'm meeting with attorneys. I'm trying to find ways through this. I'm pushing through. I'm saying, is there any way we can get through this? And most attorneys are saying to me, there's no way you could get through this. You could try to talk to their HR department, X, Y, and Z. I didn't really want to start setting off alarms that I was planning on leaving. So I didn't really want to do that. But I started meeting with these attorneys. I started understanding, my strategies ahead of me. Right? Like what's going to happen when I leave? Can I wholesale or do I have to avoid wholesaling for a couple of years and I need to figure out something to do? Another thing that I did was I went and I bought a new primary house. So that HELOC that I pulled on my house, I used that and I bought a single family house, which is a whole nother story. I'll probably make a separate video on it. But there was a reason that I did this. I knew when I leave my W-2 job, which this is something that everybody should be aware of, when you leave your W-2, if you go to get a conventional loan, most of the time they're going to ask for your, most recent W-2, your tax documents, all of that stuff. I knew that when I left, I probably wasn't going to get approved by a conventional loan for a little while. So before I made that leap, I wanted to go out and buy another house. So that way I could rent out my duplex and turn that into a cash flowing asset for me, which it is now. I make about $1,000 a month off that duplex, which was huge. When I bought my primary, now I'm like, cool, I cut my primary mortgage in half because I'm making money off my duplex. And that's a big, cut in expenses for me every single month. So all of that was happening. That was all part of my transition plan. There were other things that went into it, but just to give you guys an idea of some things that I was planning. And really, this went from January is when I first had the idea of I want to leave my job, all the way to May 17th, 2024, which is when I put my 2-week notice in. And I officially left on June 1st of 2024. Now, that leads into the third step, which is action. The third step is action, right? And this is the shortest step, but it's also the hardest step. You could spend all your time doing the transition, meeting with people, talking with people, pulling, capital out of certain places, doing all this stuff. I was building my dojo for 2 years basically, right? And all of this stuff could happen. You could be doing all of this stuff, but if you don't take action, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're never going to get to that next step, right? And that's why action is the hardest step. It's also the shortest step. And in my, opinion, in my example of what was going on, the action was putting that 2 weeks in on May 17th. That was the action. Once I sent that, that was the trigger. We are locked in. We are moving forward. We are ready to go, right? And that is really the kind of peak of all of this. You have the vision. You put the transition plan in place. You take that action, and now you are locked in. And that leads to step 4, which is faith. And one thing I want to talk about is the biggest driver for entrepreneurs, at least for myself, is hope, right? Hope is what keeps us going. It's what motivates us to jump into the unknown, right? If we didn't have hope, there'd really be no purpose in doing it, right? If I wasn't hopeful, I'd probably look for security, right? That's a trade-off. Am I going to be hopeful and go to, take that risk, take that chance because I know what's on the other side or what could be on the other side? Versus if I'm not hopeful, I'm going to look for shelter. I'm going to look for security. So hope is what motivates us, is what gets us to make those leaps of faith. And, the saying is true. Hope isn't a strategy. That's absolutely the truth, but it is a mindset. And you need to have hope as an entrepreneur, you need to have hope as an entrepreneur, and you need to keep feeding into that. You need to fuel that fire. And that is something that will continue to keep you going. If you lose that hope, that's when you lose the entrepreneurial spirit. So you need to make sure you maintain that hope. Faith, however, is a little bit different. Faith is accepting whatever is thrown at you. And at this point, you've done all of these things. You've taken that action. Now is where it's mission critical to have faith. If you don't have that faith, it's going to be very, very hard to keep going. And you need to understand there's a possibility that you succeed right away. God willing, that'd be awesome. But there's also a really, really good chance that you face adversities, you face hardship. And when you have faith, you know that you are exactly where you should be. And that is so important. You need to understand that with faith, you are going to accept what is thrown at you and what has come your way, right? And that's the biggest thing. We accept our circumstances. We understand that in these circumstances, whether they're good or bad, there's fruitful opportunity in it. And we understand that with accepting this and with this faith, we are accepting the path that God has put in front of us himself. He's put it there himself for us to continue to walk on. And I'll be totally truthful with you guys right now, right? So I have multiple businesses. I have D&D Equities. I have Distoli's Dojo, which is my course, my program. And then I have Rosary and Real Estate, which is something I'm continuing to develop. As I've gone on this path, it has not been easy, right? I left in the beginning of June. When I first left, I had some really good things happen, right? We had a couple good refinances, one for like 20,000, one for 40,000. I ended up, moving a couple of deals to some of my investor buddies. There was a lot of positives that happened. The non-compete thing was totally dropped by, I believe it's the IFC. They pretty much said, if you're, not an executive employee, the non-compete doesn't apply to you, which was totally a sign of God working in my corner. But there was a lot of positives that happened. And then we hit a lull. And we had this really, really hard lull where we had some time where these properties weren't ready to refinance yet. We weren't generating that money. I had some really great buzz on my course in the beginning, but everybody that was coming in, I don't charge much for it. It's not enough for me to really get by. And there was a lot of hardship that was faced there. But in that hardship came opportunity in a few different ways. One was anytime that we had any type of challenge within our real estate portfolio, how could we make opportunity out of that? Could we make SOPs out of that? Could we, retweak our operations so that we operate more efficiently out of that, right? And in these times of hardship, it also develops character. And as an entrepreneur, that is the path that you're on. You're on the path of developing character, right? We build these businesses, we do all that stuff, but what you realize is you yourself, you are the business. You are everything that you're building. So continue to focus on what can you pull out of these hardships, out of this adversity, and how could I be better from that? So in a nutshell, guys, that is the 4-point plan for leaving your W-2 to jumping into the realm of entrepreneurship. First, you need the vision. Then you need the transition. What am I doing to help, kind of lead to that vision? Then you got to take the action, the shortest yet the hardest step. And after you take that action, you got to have the faith. Understand that where you are is where you're meant to be, and continue to walk that path and continue to push forward. So I appreciate everybody listening. As I always say, pray the rosary, buy real estate. And if you guys want to, check out that link on how to pray the rosary and pray the rosary with me. But I look forward to continuing to throw some content at you guys. If you guys have any questions at all, my Instagram is Frankie Distoli. That's DASTOLI_REI for real estate investing. Feel free to shoot me a DM. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you guys have. And if you guys want to hear anything in particular on the show, please feel free to send it to me, and I will definitely do my best to make some content in regards to that. So I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you so much for the support, and I will talk to you guys soon.